She wed the reserved human, always ignoring he was a hidden legend. Orin had always been an ordinary man, or at least, that's how the galaxy saw him. He lived in a city that hummed with the energy of different alien species. Some were tall and sleek, others short and bulky, and many had features that seemed impossible for a human to comprehend. The air smelled of technology, spices, and strange perfumes from distant planets. Neon lights bathed the streets in a mixture of colors, making the world seem alive, buzzing with energy, but to Orin it was all just noise. He kept his distance from it all, blending into the crowd, trying to stay unnoticed. Leona, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She was a brilliant and highly respected diplomat in the Galactic Council. Her beauty and confidence turned heads wherever she went. She was loved and admired by many, but for some reason she chose to be with Orin. It puzzled everyone, especially her colleagues. The stories they heard about him, his quiet nature, his lack of ambition, made it clear that Orin was nothing special. But Leona saw something different in him. She could never explain it to anyone, not even herself. Something about his quiet demeanor intrigued her. She loved his simplicity, his calmness, and the way he never tried to be more than he was. Orin was not flashy or powerful, he was just real, and that, to Leona, was enough. Their relationship wasn't something people understood. At galas and public events, when Leona stood in the center of the room, her radiant presence impossible to ignore, Orin always stood in the background, silent and content. He never sought attention, and she never needed it. The whispers of those around them, questioning why such a powerful woman would be with a man who seemed so ordinary, never reached their ears. They were happy, and that was all that mattered to them. Life was simple for Orin. He worked at a local tech shop repairing machines, from robots to ancient gadgets that even aliens had trouble understanding. He loved working with his hands, finding joy in fixing things others saw as useless. But Leona, with her high status and connections, never tried to change him. She loved him for who he was, not for what others thought he could be. One evening, after dinner at their modest apartment, Leona asked him a question that had been on her mind for a while. "Orin, have you ever wondered about your past?" Orin looked up from his plate, his expression unchanged. "My past?" Leona nodded. "You never talk about it. You don't even speak about where you're from, how you ended up here. It's almost like you've erased it from your memory." Orin was silent for a moment, his mind far away. "There's nothing to tell," he said simply. "I'm here now, and that's all that matters." Leona wasn't convinced. There was a hidden depth in Orin that she couldn't quite place. Sometimes, when she looked at him, she felt a flicker of something ancient, something that didn't quite belong to a man like him. But she didn't press him further. She had learned long ago to let Orin be. The next day, Leona returned from a diplomatic meeting to find Orin standing by the window, staring out at the city. The sunlight streamed through the glass, casting a soft glow over his features. He looked so peaceful, yet there was something in his eyes that made Leona wonder if he was holding a secret. She shook off the feeling. Orin was just Orin, wasn't he? But when she stepped closer, something caught her attention, a faint, strange symbol etched into the back of his wrist. Leona had never noticed it before. The symbol looked ancient, almost like a language she didn't recognize. It was subtle, hidden beneath his sleeve, but it was there, as if it had always been waiting to be discovered. "Orin, what's this?" Leona asked, reaching out to touch his wrist. Orin turned to her, his eyes wide for a moment before he quickly pulled his sleeve down. "It's nothing," he said, his voice suddenly colder than usual. "Just something from a long time ago." Leona wasn't sure what to think. Orin had always been quiet about his past, but now there was an air of secrecy she couldn't ignore. She tried to push the thought away, but the feeling lingered. She had known him for so long, yet there was so much about him that she didn't understand. There were pieces of his life that didn't add up, moments when his calm demeanor felt almost too practiced, too perfect. That night after dinner, as they sat in their small living room, Leona noticed that Orin seemed more distant than usual. He was staring at his hands, lost in thought, and she could see the tension in his face. She didn't say anything, afraid of pushing him too far, but she couldn't help herself. "Orin," she said softly, "I need to know more about you. I can't keep feeling like there's a part of you that's missing." Orin's gaze flickered to hers, and for a brief moment, Leona saw something in his eyes, something deep and ancient. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by the familiar calmness she had come to know and love. "You don't need to know everything," he replied quietly. Sometimes it's better that way. Leona didn't press him any further. But that night, as she lay in bed, the questions swirled in her mind. Who was Orin really? What was it about him that made her feel like there was more beneath the surface? And why was he so determined to keep it hidden? The next day, Leona decided to do something she had never done before. She would search for answers herself. The symbol on Orin's wrist had sparked something inside her, and she knew that if she didn't find out more, it would always hang between them, an unanswered question. She began to research the symbol, using her connections to access ancient databases and forgotten archives. What she uncovered shocked her. The symbol was tied to a legend, one that few had heard of, but those who did spoke of it in hushed tones. The legend spoke of a human, a warrior who had vanished long ago, his identity erased from history. This human had once wielded unimaginable power, a power so great that it had shaped the course of galactic history. Leona couldn't believe what she was reading. Was it possible? Could Orin be the man from the legend? That evening, she returned home, her mind racing. Orin was sitting at their kitchen table, quietly sipping his drink. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw him not just as her husband, but as something more. Something legendary. Orin, she began, her voice trembling slightly, I found something today. Something about a human legend. I think it's about you. Orin's face remained calm, but there was a flicker in his eyes. I told you, Leona, he said softly, there are things you don't need to know. But Leona couldn't let it go. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter where it led. Leona's curiosity about Orin had only deepened since her discovery of the strange symbol on his wrist. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Orin was hiding something from her. The quiet man she loved seemed to have layers she hadn't seen before, and she couldn't ignore the possibility that he was not the person he had led her to believe. Over the following days, Leona continued her search for answers. She combed through archives, old books, and forgotten records. The more she uncovered, the more convinced she became that Orin was somehow connected to the legendary human warrior she had read about. She was desperate to know the truth, but every time she tried to bring it up with him, he shut her down. Orin noticed her growing distance, but he never confronted her directly. He could sense that something had shifted in their relationship, but he kept his thoughts to himself. It wasn't that he didn't want to tell her the truth, he just couldn't. The weight of the past was too heavy, and revealing it would change everything. He knew that once Leona learned the truth, there would be no going back. One evening, after dinner, Leona sat across from Orin at the small table in their apartment. Her hands rested on the surface, fingers trembling slightly. She had spent the day reading more about the human legend, piecing together fragments of information. The legend spoke of a great war, an ancient battle fought between species long lost to history. The human warrior had played a pivotal role in the conflict, defeating enemies that were said to be undefeatable. But the warrior had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only rumors and stories. Leona couldn't stop herself. Orin, she said, her voice low but steady, I've found more. I think I know who you are. Orin's eyes darkened. He looked away for a moment as if gathering his thoughts. His hand tightened around the glass in front of him. Leona, he said softly, you don't understand. Some things are better left in the past. I can't help it, Orin, Leona replied, her voice filled with emotion. You're not just some ordinary man. You're someone important, someone with a past that I need to understand. I need to know who you really are. Orin's gaze shifted back to her, his face a mask of calm. You don't need to know. You're better off without it. Leona felt a pang of frustration. How can you say that? You're everything to me, and yet you're keeping this huge part of yourself hidden. I love you, Orin, but this secrecy, it's tearing me apart. There was a long silence between them. Orin's jaw tightened, and he could see the hurt in Leona's eyes. He wanted to explain, to tell her everything, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The pain of the past was too much for him to relive. Finally, he spoke, his voice almost a whisper. I was part of something. Something far bigger than you can imagine. I had powers, abilities that no one should have. I fought in a war that almost destroyed everything, but I walked away from it all. I erased my memories, Leona. I chose to live as a normal man, far from the chaos. Leona's heart raced as she listened to his words. So it's true, she whispered, more to herself than to him. You're the one from the legend, the human warrior who disappeared. Orin nodded slowly, his eyes downcast. Yes, but I'm not that person anymore. I made a choice. I wanted peace, a life without the burden of power or war, and I found it with you." Leona felt a mix of emotions. She was shocked, yet relieved to finally hear the truth, but there was still so much she didn't understand. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why keep this from me?" "I thought I could move on," Oren replied, his voice filled with regret. "I thought I could forget who I was, but it's not that simple. The past has a way of catching up with you." Leona stood up from the table and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The lights twinkled like stars, but everything felt different now. The man she loved was a hero, a legend, and yet he had kept it all hidden from her. She turned back to face him, her voice trembling. "What happens now, Oren? You can't just leave it behind. You can't erase the past like it never happened." Oren stood up and walked toward her, his footsteps heavy. "I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to fight. I don't want the world to remember me as a warrior. I just want to live with you, Leona. I've spent too long running from my past, but now I'm here with you. That's all that matters." Leona's heart ached at his words. She loved him, but she couldn't ignore the responsibility that came with knowing the truth. If Oren was really the legendary human warrior, then his past was far from over. There were people, enemies, who would come after him, who would try to use him for their own gain, and she couldn't protect him if he kept hiding. "You can't run forever," she said quietly. "The past will catch up to you whether you want it to or not." Oren sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I know, but I don't want to drag you into it, Leona. I don't want you to become part of this war." Leona shook her head. "I'm already part of it, Oren. I'm with you. We face it together." They stood there for a long moment, their eyes locked, each of them silently acknowledging the weight of what was to come. Oren had tried to leave the past behind, but it was impossible. The world wouldn't let him forget who he was, and neither would Leona. If they were going to face the future together, they would have to confront the legacy that had shaped Oren's life. That night, Leona couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of the future, of the dangers that Oren would face now that his secret was out. She knew that their life together would never be the same again. There were too many questions, too many unknowns. And even though Oren had promised her a peaceful life, Leona knew that peace was something they might never have. The next morning, Leona made a decision. She couldn't ignore the threats that loomed over them. If Oren was truly the legend everyone feared, then they had to prepare. There was no escaping the past, no hiding from it. They had to face it together. She walked into the kitchen where Oren was already making breakfast, his hands steady as he worked. It was strange seeing him this way, so normal, so like any other man, but Leona knew better now. Oren was anything but ordinary. "Oren," she said softly, "we need to go. We need to figure out what's coming for us." Oren turned to face her, a sad smile on his lips. "I was hoping you'd say that." The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. Leona could sense the storm brewing on the horizon, but she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that clung to the air. She had always known that Oren was different, but now that she knew the truth, it felt like everything they had built together was on the verge of collapsing. The past that Oren had tried so desperately to forget was catching up to them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Leona spent her time preparing, researching, and gathering whatever information she could about Oren's past. She was determined to protect him, but she knew that the forces that had once feared his power would not let him live in peace. There were people, powerful beings, who would stop at nothing to use Oren's abilities for their own gain. And Oren, despite his desire to live a quiet life, could no longer pretend that his past wasn't a part of him. One afternoon, as Leona sat at the small desk in their apartment, sifting through old records and galactic archives, Oren walked in, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He had always been a quiet presence, but now he seemed more distant than ever. He had kept his emotions buried deep within him, but Leona could see the strain on his face. It was as though the weight of the world had been placed on his shoulders, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shrug it off. "You've been at this for hours," Oren said softly, his voice a mix of concern and exhaustion. "You need to rest." Leona glanced up from her work, her eyes meeting his. She could see the tiredness in his expression, the lines of stress that had begun to appear on his face. He was still the man she loved, but something was different now. The man she had married was no longer just a quiet, reserved human. He was a legend, and that made him both a target and a threat. "I can't rest, Oren," she replied, her voice firm. "We need to be prepared. The past is coming for us, and I don't know how long we can hide." Oren didn't argue. He had known this day would come. He had always feared it, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure how to face it. He had spent years running from his past, trying to live a simple life, but that life had been built on a lie. And now that lie was unraveling piece by piece. "I know," he said quietly, "but there's nothing we can do about it. The war is over. I walked away from it." Leona stood up, walking over to him. She reached out and gently took his hand in hers. "You can't keep running, Oren. I know you want peace, but the universe won't let you have it, not when they know who you are." Oren looked down at their joined hands, his grip tightening ever so slightly. "I never asked for any of this, Leona. I didn't want to be a hero. I didn't want to fight, but now it feels like there's no way out." Leona's heart ached for him. She could see the inner conflict in his eyes, the battle between the man he was and the legend he had become. She knew that deep down, Oren still believed that he could escape his past, that he could live a quiet life with her. But the truth was, that life was slipping further and further away. "We can face this together," Leona said softly, squeezing his hand. "I won't let you fight this alone. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself." Oren looked up at her, his expression softening. He had always known that Leona was strong, but now, in this moment, he saw something else in her. An unshakable resolve, a determination to stand by his side no matter what. And for the first time in a long while, Oren allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could face the future together. "We'll need help," he said quietly. "I can't do this on my own." Leona nodded. "I've already started reaching out to some of my contacts." "We'll find a way to protect you, Oren. We'll stop them before they can use you." Oren's gaze softened, and for a moment the weight of his past seemed to lift, if only just a little. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't deserve you." Leona shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're not alone in this. We're in this together." The next few days were a blur of action and preparation. Leona contacted old allies, reached out to trusted diplomats, and began forming a plan to safeguard Oren from those who sought to exploit him. But no matter how much she tried to prepare, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Then one evening, as they were going over their plans, an unexpected visitor arrived. The door to their apartment opened slowly, and a figure stepped inside. Leona's hand instinctively went to the weapon at her side, but she stopped when she saw who it was. The visitor was a tall alien woman with shimmering blue skin and glowing eyes. She wore the uniform of a high-ranking officer in the Galactic Council, and her presence was commanding. "Leona," the woman said, her voice cool and authoritative. "I've come for Oren." Leona's heart skipped a beat. She had heard rumors of this woman, Saren, a member of the council who had always been a thorn in Leona's side. Saren was known for her ruthless efficiency, and she was feared throughout the galaxy for her ability to get what she wanted, no matter the cost. "What do you want with him?" Leona demanded, stepping in front of Oren protectively. Saren's gaze flickered briefly to Oren, then back to Leona. "We both know why I'm here. The war is over, but the remnants of the old empire are still out there. They want him. They want to use him as a weapon, but I can stop them. I can protect him." Leona's mind raced. She had known this day would come, but she hadn't expected it to be so soon. Saren was not an ally, she was a calculated politician, always playing both sides. But the look in Saren's eyes told Leona something different. Saren wasn't just here to make a deal, she was here to offer a solution. "What do you want in return?" Leona asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Saren's lips curled into a small smile. "I'm not asking for anything in return, but I need your trust. And I need Oren's help." Leona glanced at Oren, who had been silent throughout the conversation. He stood behind her, his eyes fixed on Saren, as if trying to read her every move. She could sense his hesitation, but she also knew that they were running out of options. "I don't trust her," Oren muttered, his voice low. Leona turned to face him. "I don't either, but we don't have many choices left. If we don't do something, the past will come for us and we won't be able to escape it." Oren's expression was conflicted, torn between his desire to protect Leona and his fear of facing the past he had left behind. But as he looked at her, he saw the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to let this go, not without a fight. "We'll do it," Oren said finally, his voice firm. "But I want to know everything. I want to know exactly what we're walking into." Saren nodded, her gaze sharp. "You'll have your answers, but we need to move quickly. Time is running out." Leona looked at Oren one last time, a silent promise passing between them. They had no choice but to trust Saren, for now. The past was coming for them, and they would have to face it head-on. The days following Saren's visit were filled with an uneasy sense of urgency. Oren and Leona knew that they were running out of time. The past that Oren had buried for so long was now coming to the surface, and there was no way to escape it. The moment they had feared had arrived, and with it, the realization that their peaceful life was over. Saren had made it clear that there was no turning back. The remnants of the old empire, the ones who had once sought to control the galaxy, were closing in on Oren. They wanted to use him as a weapon, a tool to rebuild their power. And despite the promises Saren had made, Leona couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was not to be fully trusted. She had her own motives, and Leona could see that much. But right now, they had little choice but to rely on her. The first part of their plan was simple. Oren had to come out of hiding. He could no longer pretend to be just a quiet, reserved man. The galaxy needed to know that he was back, and they needed to be prepared for the consequences. Leona had arranged a meeting with Saren, hoping to gather more information about what was coming. She had to know exactly who was after Oren and what they wanted from him. It was late in the evening when Saren arrived at their apartment again. She walked in without knocking, her presence filling the room with an air of authority. Oren stood near the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. He was always calm, always composed, but tonight, Leona could see the tension in his posture. "You're running out of time," Saren said, her voice smooth but sharp. "The Empire's forces are on the move. They've found your location. If we don't act quickly, we'll lose our chance to stop them." Leona stepped forward. "What do they want with him? Why is he so important?" Saren looked at Oren, her eyes flickering with a hint of something darker. "Oren isn't just any human. He's the key to controlling the galaxy's balance of power. His abilities are unparalleled, and if the wrong people get their hands on him, they could reshape everything." Oren turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "And you're not one of those wrong people, I suppose?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Saren didn't flinch. "No," she said firmly. "I'm trying to help you, but you have to trust me. The forces coming for you won't stop. They've been hunting you for years. I'm your only chance to survive." Leona watched the exchange between them, trying to gauge Saren's sincerity. She wasn't sure if she trusted the woman, but she had to admit that they didn't have many options. If Oren was going to be a target, they needed all the help they could get. "We'll need a plan," Leona said, her voice determined. "We need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Saren nodded. "I'll help you, but we can't waste time." The next few days were a blur of activity. Saren helped them prepare for the inevitable confrontation, connecting them with old allies, organizing safe houses, and arranging for transport. Oren had resisted at first, wanting to stay hidden, but he knew deep down that hiding wasn't an option anymore. His past had found him, and now he had to face it head-on. They traveled in secrecy, moving from one location to another, always staying one step ahead of the enemy. The more they traveled, the more Oren realized just how far-reaching his past truly was. There were whispers in the shadows, rumors about the legend that had shaped the galaxy's history. He had once been a hero, a warrior who had fought to protect the galaxy from destruction. But now, he was nothing more than a target. Oren couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so wrong. He had walked away from it all, choosing to live a quiet life with Leona, but now he was being dragged back into the war he had tried so hard to forget. Every time they moved, every time they changed locations, he couldn't escape the feeling that he was being hunted. The enemy was closing in, and he knew that eventually they would catch up with him. Leona, on the other hand, was determined to stay strong. She had never seen Oren like this, so vulnerable, so uncertain. He had always been her rock, the one person she could rely on, but now it felt like he was falling apart and she didn't know how to help him. She had promised him that they would face this together, but the weight of the situation was beginning to take its toll on both of them. One evening, as they sat in a small, dimly lit safe house, Oren stood by the window, staring out at the darkened landscape. The wind howled outside and the trees swayed in the distance. Leona watched him, her heart heavy with worry. She knew that he was fighting a battle within himself, one that he wasn't ready to face. "Oren," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here. We're in this together." Oren didn't respond at first. He just stood there, his eyes lost in the distance. Finally, he turned to face her, his expression filled with a mix of regret and resolve. "I never wanted this for you," he said quietly. You deserve more than this. You deserve a life without fear, without danger. Leona stepped forward, reaching out to take his hand. You're not alone in this. We're fighting together, and we're going to win. Oren smiled faintly, his eyes softening as he looked at her. I don't know what I'd do without you, Leona. She squeezed his hand, a sense of determination rising within her. You don't have to. We're in this together. No matter what happens, we face it as a team. Just then the door to the safe house creaked open, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features, wearing the uniform of an elite soldier. His presence was commanding, and his eyes swept over the room as he assessed the situation. We need to move, the man said urgently. They're coming, we don't have much time. Leona's heart skipped a beat. Who's coming? The man's eyes flickered to Oren, then back to Leona. The Empire's forces, they know where you are, they've tracked you this far, it's time to go. Oren's expression hardened and he stood up straighter, his body tense. How much time do we have? The soldier's eyes narrowed. Not much, they'll be here within hours. We need to move now if we want to stay ahead of them. Leona could see the change in Oren. The man she loved was no longer just the quiet, reserved person he once was. He was the hero, the warrior, the one they had all been waiting for. She saw the fire in his eyes, the determination that had once made him legendary. And in that moment, she knew that they would fight together no matter the odds. Let's go, Oren said, his voice firm. It's time to face the past. The soldier nodded and turned, leading them through the back exit of the safe house. Leona followed closely behind, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. The moment they had been preparing for was finally here. The battle for Oren's future and the future of the galaxy was about to begin. As they made their way through the darkened streets, Leona couldn't help but look at Oren. He had always been her protector, but now she realized that he was more than just a man. He was the key to saving them all. And she would stand by him, no matter what came next. The night was heavy with the sound of distant sirens and the whisper of wind through the empty streets. Oren and Leona moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing on the pavement as they followed the soldier through the darkened alleyways. The urgency in the air was palpable. They had been running for hours, ever since they had received the warning that the Empire's forces were closing in. Oren's heart was pounding, but he knew that this was no longer just about him. This was about the galaxy, about stopping the forces that had once tried to control everything. And this time, they wouldn't succeed. They reached a hidden transport hub, an underground facility known only to a few trusted allies. The walls were lined with dark metal, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. The soldier led them to a sleek ship, its engines humming softly, waiting for their departure. We need to leave immediately, the soldier said, his voice tense. The longer we stay, the closer they get. We can't afford to waste any time. Leona nodded, her eyes scanning the area. She had never felt so out of place. The world around her had always been one of diplomacy, of controlled power and carefully managed situations. But now she was living in the shadows, fighting a battle she never expected to fight. And yet with Oren by her side, she felt stronger than ever. As they boarded the ship, Oren paused for a moment, his gaze lingering on the city they were leaving behind. The lights of the metropolis shimmered in the distance, a reminder of the life he had once known, the life he had chosen to leave behind. But there was no going back now. His past was chasing him, and it would continue to do so until he faced it head-on. Leona stepped up beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. We're doing the right thing, she said quietly. We're going to stop them, Oren. We're going to protect the future. Oren looked at her, his eyes softening. I never wanted this for you, Leona. But I'm glad you're with me. I don't know what I'd do without you. Leona smiled, squeezing his arm. You're not alone in this. We'll face it together. The ship's engines roared to life as the soldier activated the controls. The ground beneath them trembled as they lifted off, the city disappearing below them. Oren took a deep breath, steadying himself. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but he knew he couldn't run anymore. The battle was coming, and he had to be ready. They traveled for hours through the endless expanse of space, moving deeper into uncharted territory. The further they went, the more isolated they became. There were no more distractions, no more safe places. It was just them and the enemy racing against time. Leona sat beside Oren, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. They had a plan, but the unknown still loomed large. She had seen how determined Oren was, how much he wanted to protect her and the future they had dreamed of. but she also saw the weight of the past on his shoulders. The legend, the warrior, the man who had saved the galaxy, he wasn't just a hero. He was a weapon, and weapons always came with a price. "Orin," she said softly, breaking the silence, "do you ever regret it?" "The life you left behind." Orin turned to look at her, his eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes, but I made my choice. I wanted peace. I wanted to live a simple life with you, and I don't regret that. But now it's different. I can't ignore the past anymore." Leona nodded, understanding the complexity of his feelings. "We can't change the past, but we can fight for the future. We can make sure that what you did wasn't in vain." Orin smiled faintly, his gaze shifting back to the stars outside the window. "You're right. We can't change what happened, but we can make sure it doesn't define us." The ship continued its journey through the stars, and as they neared their destination, the tension in the air grew heavier. They were headed to a hidden base, a place where the final confrontation would take place. It was a desolate world, far from the eyes of the galaxy, a place where Orin could face his past without the distractions of the universe around him. When they finally landed, the planet was as barren as they had expected. The ground was cracked and dry, and the sky above was a sickly shade of orange. The air was thick with dust, and the winds howled as they stepped off the ship. Leona pulled her jacket tighter around her, trying to shield herself from the harsh environment. The soldier led them to a hidden base, a fortress built deep into the planet's surface. The entrance was guarded by advanced security systems, but with Saren's help, they gained access without much trouble. The place was cold and sterile, filled with the hum of machines and the occasional clank of metal doors closing. Orin's footsteps echoed through the hallways as they made their way deeper into the base. Every corner they turned, every door they opened, felt like they were getting closer to something big. The past was closing in, and there was no turning back. Finally, they reached a large, dimly lit chamber. At the center of the room stood a table, covered with maps and data screens. Orin recognized the markings. This was a military planning room, a place where strategies were made and battles were won. Saren was already there, her eyes scanning the screens as she prepared for the final move. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "We're about to face the enemy. The Empire's forces are closing in. They'll be here within the hour." Leona's heart raced. The final battle was moments away, and Orin was about to face the very forces that had hunted him for years. She could see the determination in his eyes, but she also saw the fear. Orin had always been a man of peace, but now he was about to become a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for those who had been oppressed for so long. "We need to move quickly," Saren continued. "The longer we wait, the harder it will be to stop them. But we have one advantage. They don't know everything about you, Orin. They don't know the full extent of your power, and that's what we're going to use." Orin stood still, his hands clasped behind his back. "I can't do this alone. We need to work together, all of us." Leona stepped forward, standing beside him. "We're with you, Orin. We've come this far. We'll finish this together." As they prepared for the final battle, Orin felt a surge of strength. The weight of his past, the legend that had haunted him, no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a weapon, one that he could wield for the greater good. He was no longer just the quiet man who had hidden from the world. He was the legend, the hero, the warrior who would fight to protect those he loved. And as the first wave of enemy forces descended upon the base, Orin knew that this battle would be unlike any he had ever fought before. But he wasn't alone. With Leona by his side and the allies they had gathered along the way, they would fight for the future. They would fight for the galaxy, and they would fight for each other. The war had come, but Orin was ready. Ready to face the past, ready to fight for the future, and ready to ensure that the galaxy would never again fall under the control of those who would use him as a weapon.